what's going on, family? Listen, we've had a lot of amazing guests on the show, and perhaps you may have never, ever listened to those episodes. So we wanted to present a new segment called SONW Classic, where we go back, we revisit those iconic conversations, and give those full episodes back to you. Sit back and enjoy this week's SONW Classic. Ladies and gentlemen, Amanda Pittman is on the show today. What's going on, fam?
Nothing much. I'm just so excited to be on the show. Thank you so much for having me, Shawn.
Take us back to the young girl growing up. Where are you from?
Yes. Okay. I'm actually from Fort Worth, Texas. You know, growing up, I didn't have much. I wasn't this person who was super well connected. I didn't know who I was. And so I really resonate with the people who feel like I don't have a place to belong. I may not be in the in crowd. Those I feel like are my people. You know, those are the people who champion and say, hey, like, let me show you how to find your place. Let me show you how to find your stride. And so I grew up there, went to school for music in Dallas, Texas at SMU, totally on scholarship. I didn't deserve to be there, but God, I did not deserve to be at that school. Some people refer to SMU as Southern Millionaires University because it is a predominantly white, extremely affluent school, like old money, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like it's the family. And that's where I met my husband. And before that, I just didn't have, like I said, I didn't have a good sense of self. And because of that, it caused me to settle on a lot of my relationships. But during this time, after I left a relationship that I was in and God captured my heart again, it was right after that I started dating my husband, and he just completely showed me a different way to live. I was like, oh, wow, you know, people can actually be healthy and not be toxic. You know, like, you don't have to go crazy. You can actually talk and have a real conversation when you need to communicate. And I just learned a better way, you know. And after that, he started doing videos on YouTube, and there were relationship videos, and those started connecting with people, and we started finding our people. We started to find our audience, and then after that we started sharing platforms, and that's how I really found my place and my people and my voice. And over time it shifted from just talking about relationships to talking about confidence, but finding it in Christ, because after God changed my life, that was the theme I found in my life. I didn't have this sense of self. I didn't have this sense of identity. But once I did, that's when everything changed. And that's how God kind of shaped my story.
You had a saying that you put up that I wrote down, and it said, there are certain things you can only learn in the trenches. What did you mean by that?
So many times we want to go from mountaintop to mountaintop. We don't want to walk through seasons that feel like we're in the valleys, that feel like we're in the trenches. But when I think about every single lesson that I've learned that's made me wiser, that's made me stronger, that has shaped me into the woman who I am today, it's not been on the mountaintops. It's been in the trenches. It has been in the trenches. That's where I found. You can say I have faith. You can say this is what I stand for. You can say this is what I believe. But you don't know if that's true unless it's been tested. And testing happens when you can say, hey, if everything else is stripped from you, what do you truly believe? That's when you know what you're really made of. And so I actually had to do that season and understand all of these places and relationships that I'm trying to find fulfillment in will work. And when I tell you every single thing that I was attached to, my relationships, our finances, our business, ministry, everything took off in that year. But I don't think that I would have ever gotten to experience that had I not gone through the trenches. Going through the trenches, you learn, but it makes the mountaintops that much sweeter. And so I thank God now. I thank God for the trenches just as much for the mountaintops, because that's when you become who you're supposed to be so that you can sustain what God has you to have.
And I appreciate you for saying that. You know, another thing that you said is that if you aren't facing your fears, then you are not numbering your days. Let's break that down.
Yes. Oh my goodness. We assume that we have more time than we have. We really take our time for granted. I think about death really often. I started living with the end in mind. Whenever we don't live with the end in mind, we assume that we have more time. We assume that we're not going to die young. We assume we're going to live till we're 80. And so because we have this false sense of assurance, what we're doing is we're squandering the time that's in front of us. We say, oh, whenever I get there, that's when I'll do X, Y, Z. Or whenever I reach this destination, or whenever I have all of these qualifications, then I'll be ready to step out and face my fears. But that only happens when you assume that you have time. Because what a lot of people assume is that, oh, there are people who are fearless, and then there are people who are just fearful.
Fact.
And that's not the case. We all experience fear, but the people who are courageous are the ones who have a hope and a conviction that's greater than their fear that helps them to face it. And so for me, I just think about when someone eulogy at my funeral, I want them to say, Amanda laid it all on the line. She didn't waste a moment. Even when she didn't see how it was going to play out, she was going to step out in faith. All I can say is that is God's faithfulness. But so many times we're afraid to even take the first step. We're afraid to even be vulnerable and feel uncomfortable. But it's the people who are willing to pay the price of discomfort in order to get to the next mountain, you know? And so when I think about numbering my days, I'm saying I don't want to die with regret. I want to lay it all out on the table. I only have one life. We say YOLO. And whenever we say YOLO, we're thinking about doing something crazy, doing something risky, doing something belligerent. But what would it look like if we had that same mentality, YOLO, and we did that when it came to our calling, to our purpose, to our legacy? That's the life I want to live, and I want other women to live that life as well. So when we shift our mentality from this temporary mentality to an eternal one, and even what kind of legacy am I going to live, that's when you start facing your fears because you have something bigger than you that empowers you to face your fears. That's the mentality behind that.
And I also want to get into talking about what you got coming up. There's another thing you mentioned, and I wrote it down. It says, walking in your God-given calling. If someone's listening right now, they're asking, all right, Amanda, how do I do that? How do we make that happen?
I would say that your calling leaves clues. We don't know the entire path, and it's not our job to. It's our job to surrender to the God who already paved the path. And when we walk with him, we're going to be able to look back and see all along, oh, wow, I see a trend. I see a pattern. God has been using me in this calling and in this purpose. We don't know our calling and then step into it. We stumble into it. Perfect example. I shared a little bit of my story. You know, whenever my husband and I were in college, when we first started dating, we started doing relationship videos together. And that wasn't my ultimate purpose, ultimate calling. I wasn't called to be in the relationship space in perpetuity. However, that little act of faith, that little act of putting myself out there started paving a way for something I didn't even see coming. And so many times how our calling happens. That's how we discover it. It's because we're able to step out in faith, get outside of our comfort zone and try something. And then it opens up a path that we would have never chose for ourselves. We don't have to worry about figuring out the entire plan, but if we're willing to just put one foot in front of the other, God unfolds it. And we realize he's been with us the entire time. And so my heart is to teach people, hey, ask God about how he has designed you. Stop looking to the right and looking at everyone else's design. Say, God, how have you created me? If you are an introvert, be the best, most faithful steward of being an introvert, if you are an artist, stop trying to be this analytical person. Stop trying to make your weaknesses stronger, but double down on your strengths. I can't tell you how many people have this false view of how I do everything. I don't do everything. I really don't. I just double down on my strengths. I know what I can do, and I'm very acquainted with what I can't do. I know my weaknesses better than I know my strengths. But what I'm not going to do is waste my time trying to make my weaknesses stronger and just say, Lord, thank you that you designed me this way. I'm going to double down on my God-given design so that you can get the most out of this. So God has designed us with different gifts, skills, abilities, talents, passions, networks. And it's not our job to try and get what someone else has. It's our job to leverage and multiply what we have. And then that's when we're going to be able to say, you know what? I am God to use every single bit of me for his glory. But we don't get to have that unless we know how we're designed. And so if you want to walk in your calling, I would just say define your design, align with your design, and also just step out of your comfort zone and take steps forward, and you'll see that God has been using you all along.
Yo, what you think? I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I want to know what you learned. So if you wouldn't mind, would you take a screenshot of you listening to the podcast on your phone right now? Upload to your Instagram stories, tag me at Shawn Anthony _, and then let me know in that Instagram story what is one thing that you learned. I love hearing from you, my listeners, thought leaders, former or current students all around the world. Let me know, and while you're doing this, go inside the podcast app, subscribe, leave a 5-star review and a 5-star rating. Again, this helps us reach more people. And if you want to be a part of this mission, helping us change the world one person at a time, it makes a massive difference by you leaving a review. Thanks so much. I'll see you next week. And remember, dream it, believe it, go out and get it.